tracking milestones of an incredible journey spanning 30 years. Rahman Music Sheets. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, The Forgotten Hero. It was the second film when Shyam Benegal and A.R. Rahman worked together. Javed Akhtar wrote all the songs. It's not a usual film album with 5 to 6 songs in it. The film has 20 tracks. 7 tracks have vocals. 13 theme tracks perfectly portray characters, locations, and mood of the film. For many, this film transformed Rahman from a music composer to a maestro.
So Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, The Forgotten Hero, must have been a very complex film to score, capturing his journey to so many countries. What exactly was your brief to Rahman?
You see, one of the reasons I wanted Rahman for that was because of his range. You know, even if we had not experienced, like say for instance, Bose's story goes all the way from the east to the west, or rather the west to the east. You know, we start in Bengal and then we go westwards, you know, via the frontier of India into Europe and so on and so forth, and into Germany. And then from there we come all the way to Southeast Asia and to Japan. So we are really traveling, you know, culturally speaking, of a vast area of the earth itself. And musically, obviously, there are so many different changes in all of this. And I think to give it a certain kind of character, I think he was absolutely ideal for it. You know, and it worked very well. I was very pleased with the way the music worked. Everybody else also, you know, because wherever that film was shown, of course, it wasn't necessarily released too well at that time, but then it has its airing on television, you know, many times. Yeah.
The film depicts the life of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose from 1939 onwards. It starts from his escape in disguise to the events leading to the revival of Indian National Army under Netaji. The music covered many geographies and situations, including theme tracks for Durga Puja, Afghanistan, Hitler in Germany, war themes, and many songs of Indian National Army.
So in the film, the vocal songs and INA songs were definitely a major storytelling tools. Was it a predetermined ploy to integrate songs with storytelling?
Well, also because, you see, one of the things to remember is that the Indian National Army, you know, the Indian National Army of that Subhash Chandra Bose had started during the Second World War, had many songs. They had songs that they had I mean, their bandmaster, as it were, was also a composer. You know, he'd composed many marching songs and different things. When I started to go to school, that is well after the whole episode, I mean, Bose himself had disappeared. But the fact was that many of the songs of the INA had become very popular songs for us to sing, you know, at that time. And so we had to have all of that into film, you know, to use some of the melodic things from that, which Rahman did extremely well. You know, he worked on them, and he worked on them brilliantly, actually.
Before Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, The Forgotten Hero, Benegal had also made The Making of the Mahatma, focusing on Gandhiji's life in South Africa. Most of his earlier films too were inspired by real incidents or real-life stories. We couldn't resist asking him what kind of cinema influenced him.
The kind of cinema that influenced me in my own making of films was essentially the kind of films that emerged originally from countries like Italy, during the what one might call the neorealistic cinema which developed in Europe, soon after the Second World War. It was based essentially on reality, stories that emerged out of real life, rather than what we might call contrived storytelling. Telling a story which could be either a melodramatic story or a tragedy or comedy or whatever, but much of it contrived. So I think the whole thing was to make the film look as uncontrived as possible, as though it is a chunk of real life that you have taken, which itself is a contrivance, mind you. But that's the art of cinema, to make it not look contrived. So any great art is like that. Everything is a contrivance, but the fact is, because it's as against what is real, it's a contrivance. But to make that sense of contrivance disappear is the art. And that's, that is something that is very, very important to me, as it was at the beginning of my career, as it is now.
Sir, you are Guru Dutt ji's cousin. For a budding filmmaker, it was a dream to work under him. But you decided not to work under Guru Dutt ji. Why?
I didn't want my work to become imitative of him. If I were actually to be working with him, I would have developed his way of doing things, his thinking, his philosophy, all of those things, which would have become, I would have become, in other words, a kind of rubber stamp of him, which I did not want, because I wanted my own voice to be heard, and my own thinking to predominate what I was doing. And that can only happen when you learn to make your own mistakes, and from that you really learn. In other words, you have to stand on your own 2 feet and not be sitting on somebody else's shoulders. So you see, because you can do that as well. A lot of people do that. So I was very conscious of that.
But you decided to work in ad world, making advertising films, which is all about very polished imagery. But feature films that you made were starkly realistic. Do you see a contradiction there, sir?
Well, it has to, because you see, I learned my craft in making advertising films, because I didn't go to a film school, to learn the craft of making films. I learned the craft of making films by making advertising films. So in that sense, I think my learning process was far more effective than if I were to have gone to a film school. Because the film school would have taught me in a particular order, but by doing advertising films, the challenge was much greater. Because you would have to change, every day it was a different kind of film you were making. And also the techniques. There's so many different kinds of techniques that you get an opportunity to work with and work on. So because of that, I think that was much better learning in terms of becoming a filmmaker than if I had actually gone to a film school. So I think 10 years or decade or more of making advertising films helped me enormously in becoming a filmmaker. Because, I didn't have to be anybody else's assistant even. I could directly start making films because of my advertising film background.
Coming back to Rahman, the background score of Bose, how would you rate that? considering there were so many foreign locations and aesthetic backdrops to the film?
Well, you see, Rahman wrote an extraordinarily good score. And what is more, he insisted, and I think I accepted also, that we should get a proper Western orchestra to record it, you know. Not people in either Mumbai or in Chennai to do it, but a proper orchestra. And so we got the Czech, Symphony Orchestra, and we recorded it in Prague. You know, Rahman himself conducted it, and then we recorded it there. And you know, it worked so well for the film. You know, of course it was a bit expensive, but the fact was that it was worth doing. And you know, and he loved the orchestra that he worked with, because he'd already, I think, worked with orchestras in Vienna and in Paris and so on and so forth. But we had this orchestra in Prague, which was also very good, you know. So he got exactly what he wanted. I think we all ended up being very happy with the way we got that music.
Many believe that Bose, the forgotten hero, completed Rahman's transition from a music composer to a maestro. Would you agree?
Yes, well, I should imagine so, because, you know, he was a composer, he was also a conductor. In other words, he knew how the instruments would work together, and you know how much stress to give on one and how much to the other, and so on. In other words, he functioned both. You know, when you use the word maestro to a person who's a conductor, you know, not necessarily to a composer, to a conductor, because the conductor works out the balances, you know, between the instruments to get the right kind of balance, and he gives it an interpretation. The composer writes the music, but there can be many interpretations. But what one might call a definitive interpretation is given by a conductor who you consider as a maestro. And that is what Rahman is, you know, because his understanding of music is so absolutely brilliant, I mean, so sophisticated also, which is why I think people call him a maestro for that reason.
From one central protagonist of India's struggle for independence, we move to another film set in pre-independence India. Lagan, a film that not only got nominated for Oscar, but also became a landmark in the history of Indian cinema and film music. In our next episode, director of Lagan, Ashutosh Gowarikar, joins us. Stay with us. Rahman Music Sheets will continue to track his incredible journey to superstardom, connecting you with his creative partners, also engaging with musicians he inspired. If you have reinterpreted or recreated Rahman's music, share your videos. If selected, you will get featured on Rahman Music Sheets. To submit your videos, log on to our website o2-india.com.